In this next video, we're going to cover off text objects. So let's create a new InDesign document with the intent of digital publishing, iPad, portrait. Let's bin off the text frame InDesign gave us and create one of our own down the middle of the page. And let's fill that with some placeholder text. Select it, beef up the size a little bit so we can actually read it. Save our document, let's call it text. And then we can build it and see what that gives us. Previewer, let's choose our text. And that's it. You see exactly what you see within InDesign. You can't see any of this extra text that InDesign is showing you that you have because we bumped up the font, so the text has overflowed the text box. So ideally, we'd like to be able to see that within the app. So we go back to our object panel, we select our text box, and we tick scroll. Build that to the simulator, and we will see our text is now scrollable by the user until you get the full extent of the text right through to the end. Go back to the plugin, and here you've got various different options. You can say, yeah, well, I'd quite like that to bounce when the user reaches the edges. So now, and the user gets to the end or the beginning of the text and they drag down, it just has this little bounce response, which you see a lot in apps. So that's quite a intuitive feel for the users. Back to your other options, you can choose what style of scroll bars, if at all, are displayed when the user scrolls. And if you look back here in the previewer, you'll see the text where at the points where this text scrolls out of sight, there's this hard line that cuts it, and that's not particularly pleasing to the eye. So we might want to soften that up a little bit. That's where this gradient setting comes in. So let's switch that on. You get to choose vertical or horizontal. In this case, we want vertical because we want to apply a gradient to the top edge and the bottom edge. So you get to choose how much of the text box is covered by this gradient at the start, which in vertical mode is the top, and the end. So that would be right would be the end in horizontal, the bottom is the end in vertical. So you can choose whether to specify this as pixels, px, or as a percentage. Let's stick with pixels for now. Let's set it to 40 pixels at the start and 40 pixels at the end. Build that. And you can see we've now got this slightly more soft effect where that cut is. And that's just a bit nicer for the users to see there, I think. What you will notice, though, is when you're at the start, your text is kind of a little bit covered over by this gradient. And if you want to avoid that, that's easy enough. Open up InDesign's text frame options. And here you can apply a margin to it. So let's say we want to indent that by maybe 20 pixels at the top, 20 pixels at the bottom. You can see here it's given us that little bit of spacing. The text will start a bit further down in the text frame and stop a bit further from the bottom. Build that, and you can see now that this is well clear of the gradient now. You have to scroll up quite a way to get to that gradient. So that is the gradient option. There's another thing that you can do within this, which is the text, rather than being provided as part of the InDesign document, the text can be fed in from an external file. This is useful if, say, you've got a team of people working on one page. You might have an art person who's laying out the page, laying out where the text frames should be in relation to the images, whereas you might have somebody else that's working on the actual words to go into that page. This way, the person writing the words doesn't have to send the file or the updates in for you to paste into the InDesign document every time. They can just update a text file, specify that name here, and then at build time it will detect that, and it will feed those words in place of what's in there in your InDesign document. So two separate people can work on the same page effectively. You can also provide CSS styling if you want to via a .style file here that you would specify. And if you fed in text in this way, you've provided a file name, this button, this checkbox here will become enabled for you, and that says scalable. And all that does is within the container app, if you want to, within here you can add an option for the users to be able to say, I'd like my text display a little bit bigger than it currently is. You have a different like font increase and decrease font size buttons, so the users, just in terms of accessibility, can beef up their font size if they want to make it a little bit more readable.